Please be seated. If you're standing, if you're sitting down, you're already there. Okay. So tonight we're gathered here at the headquarters of the Peaceful Solution, and of course those of you online, we're gathered here for another class of the Peaceful Solution Character Education Program Teacher Certification course. And so all of us that are aspiring to be teachers of the Peaceful Solution, whether we have a lot of experience or little experience, we can learn through these classes and see how other teachers, how they define their role and the different styles of teaching that take place. We have a variety of teachers that you're able to see how they do that. And we all have different approaches to the examples that we give, whether we have videos or articles or real life experiences or whatever the case might be, we can see that by those different examples we can connect somewhere in there. You might not connect with each teacher, but surely there somewhere there will be a connection. And that's what we want to do with our students also. When you're teaching students, you want to get that connection somewhere in there. You're probably not going to connect with every student, but you try, and somewhere along the way something will trigger, and something that you spoke, something that you taught concerning the Peaceful Solution, somewhere in their life that little voice back in their head will come up one day, and they'll remember what was said about a certain thing, showing that your teaching has not gone away, void. So we are in the respect book. This is, of course, we've had some other units already that we've been through, setting the stage, setting the foundation for where we're at now, and we've got a little bit more to go. Respect is an interesting thing in that respect is showing true care and concern, a little bit of paraphrasing here, but true care and concern for not only others, but also yourself. You want to show true care and concern and respect for yourself and to others. And that's kind of where we're at in the Peaceful Solution Respect unit right now, is in this section where it's talking about respecting yourself, respecting others, being optimistic, having the right attitude. And thank you for showing that. And so what we're going to do is Katan left off on he finished page 34 last week. We're going to do a brief review of page 34. If you'll go to the next slide. Okay. That's, okay, we've got one out of order. Can you go to the next slide, please? And then the next slide. Okay. So we've got that section blown up. Hopefully you can read it a little bit better than maybe we might have to do it a little bit more next time, but I'll go over those highlighted spots with you. And Katan covered this very, very well last week. I just wanted to point out a couple things to refresh your memory while we're getting started here. So if you'll look at the screen there, it says optimism and pessimism and your thoughts. Although thinking positively is important to how you treat yourself and others, many people must learn how to be optimistic, positive thinkers. Now, being optimistic is a positive character trait that will enable you to expect the best possible outcome from a situation. So I'd like to read that one more time. Being optimistic, okay? Follow along. We're going to go a little slow right here. But being optimistic is a positive character trait, okay, mark that one up, that will enable you, that will allow you and help you and encourage you and be part of you to expect the best possible outcome from a situation. Have you ever run across a person like that? I mean, they're just overflowing with optimism. There's like no negativity coming from them at all. They could be presented with one of the hardest chores that you might sit back and look and start thinking about all the reasons why not to do something, but the person just says, "Okay, let's get going, let's get her done." With the optimistic attitude. It's all attitude. This is an attitude that we're talking about. Being pessimistic or optimistic is an attitude. And therefore, that's why you'll hear me say from time to time that attitude is everything. It would be very hard. Well, let me read this next part too. First, optimistic people are hopeful and encouraging to themselves and others. Now, pessimism, on the other hand, so see, vast differences, optimistic, pessimistic. Pessimism, on the other hand, is a negative character trait. All right, put a big X by that one. We don't want that. A pessimistic person, now get this, a pessimistic person will always see what is wrong in a situation. Now, you might know somebody like that too. I'm sure that all of us have experienced the differences being around an optimistic person or around a pessimistic person. And, you know, bad character corrupts. If you're around someone who's negative all the time, then try to encourage that person. Try to show them the other end of the scale and being optimistic. But as time goes on, you know, you might have to make a decision on getting with other optimistic people and spending more time with them rather than the negativity. Because that negativity, man, you know, in everything we do, our actions, our behavior, our attitudes, they ripple out. You know how you get around somebody and you could just feel the energy being drained from you, you know, if you know what I mean. Or you get around somebody that you just seem to be, you know, your energy building because of the energy that they've got. So anyway, all that ripples outwards. It's a ripple effect, and we've learned about that already, and we mention it over and over again. I'll probably mention it again before the night's over. But it is a ripple effect. And so this is what we want to keep in mind when dealing with pessimistic people, is that we too can get that attitude. That attitude of pessimism, it kind of ruins your life. I mean, you know, you get it and you're negative all the time. You get down, you get depressed, nothing goes right. I mean, it's a terrible thing. And so when you see that taking place, you might look at who you're hanging with, you know. But I'm going to go ahead and read the rest of this. So, a pessimistic person will always see what's wrong in a situation. You ought to highlight that if you have a book. I mean, that is really something to remember. And also up above, you know, being optimistic is a positive character trait that will enable you to expect the best possible outcome from a situation. I would highlight that too. Now, here's some more about a pessimistic person. And this isn't always, I mean, a person might have all the facts, but a pessimistic person will always see what's wrong in a situation. He usually has a problem with almost everything and jumps to conclusions without getting all the facts. Pessimistic people are negative thinkers, and a pessimistic thinker has a tendency to feel badly about himself and the world around. Okay, you can go ahead and drop that slide. So looking at what was just talked about there, they're just total different ends of the scale. Being optimistic, being pessimistic. Yeah, you can have a mixture of both of those things, but you know, it doesn't work too well together because the attitude you have is really what's shown to everybody. It's kind of tough to have an attitude of optimism, you know, today, and tomorrow you have this attitude of negativity and pessimism, you know. I bet if we went around, and for you out in the audience, the internet audience too, if there's anyone around you or if you work around some people, you could look and kind of by what you know about a person and your experience with them, you could probably pin a label on them on whether they seem to be mostly pessimistic or optimistic. Now, being optimistic does also have that ripple effect too, that attitude of optimism. It does tend to spread out and encourage others to be that way too. But if you got someone that's so negative, man, it's sometimes that's hard to overcome. So anyway, that was page 34, and let's go ahead and turn back to the lesson plan. Now you can go back to those first two slides if you will. Okay. And so on lesson plan 2, page D, yep. Lesson Plan 2, page D in Procedure 7. It says to tell students that another important aspect of developing self-respect involves controlling their self-talk, or what they say to themselves and about themselves. And then it goes on to tell us what to read and so forth. And Catan did that. He covered all that from pages 33 through 34. But I want you to look at something. Remember, the last page mentioned is page 34 on page D right there. Now let's go ahead and go to the next slide. And this is where we're at tonight. We're in procedure number 8, but notice it doesn't start out with page 35 being mentioned anywhere. It's like it's gone, right? Page 35 has disappeared. Well, no, it just falls in line with the rest of it, and it just wasn't mentioned here. But we are going to cover page 35 too. So procedure 8 says explain to students. Now this is the note for you, the guideline for you, the teacher. It doesn't always go exactly like this, but this is a guideline and you should follow it as close as possible so that you can make sure, especially if you're new in teaching the peaceful solution, so you can make sure that you're working as hard as you can to get the proper message across to your students. So explain to students that the way to eliminate negative self-talk is to learn how to, with commitment and practice, replace their negative thoughts with positive ones. Have students turn to page 36, but in this case we're turning to page 35 first, and then 36. And that'll be the section entitled Replace Those Thoughts. And then after that, we're going to look at replacement thoughts on page 37. And if you're in the classroom situation where you can allow them to share their answers with the class, okay? And we might get to procedure 9. We'll see how this goes tonight, but procedure 8 is where we're at. And so let's go ahead and turn over to page 35 in our handbooks. And you can go ahead and go to, you can drop that slide, if you will, and go on to the next slide, and then I believe the following one after that. There it is, right there. Okay, so we're showing the full page here. We're going to break it down in just a minute. But for those of you that don't have a book, by the way, if you don't have one and you're on the internet, you can, if you're on Facebook, you can go ahead and pull up the books and you can download this particular book and all the other ones that we've been through so far. So this particular unit is Respect. You can download it and you can go right to page 35. So page 35, let's go ahead and go to the next slide, please. Hopefully, y'all can read that. We might still have to do a little better at getting closer in, but think about it. Now, this is page 35 in the Respect unit, chapter 2. Think about it. Becoming an optimistic, positive thinker takes, get this, practice, practice, practice. Remember the developing of a positive character? You develop these character traits. You don't just decide one day that I'm going to practice self-control. It doesn't go quite like that. You can decide to do that, and you can make that a goal of yours and be determined to achieve that, but it takes practice. It takes work. So if you're practicing it, this is where, when you're practicing something on an everyday basis, then when the pressure comes on, then when the heat turns up a little bit, that's when your practice is going to show forth. You will probably not do anything except what you've been practicing, what you've been doing, your normal everyday walk. You can't be going around one day doing one thing and then the heat gets turned up, the pressure's on, and you got to make a decision to do something, and you're like, oh, hey, I'm going to do it the way the peaceful solution says here. It doesn't work that way. You got to practice. Make it part of your life. So practice, practice, practice. However, you must first become aware of some of the differences between negative and positive thinker before you can begin training yourself to think positively. You can drop the slide for a minute. So we're talking about learning to think positively. And, we stressed a little bit on that page 34 there about the difference between an optimistic person and negative person, pessimistic person. And so, again, this is one of those things that doesn't change overnight. It does take a lot of practice. And, you can start out every day by waking up and instead of saying, "Oh man, I forgot to set the coffee maker," or whatever the case might be, whatever thing might not be exactly what you would want, rather than saying with your mouth the negative thing, rather than encouraging that, and then mumbling around and you can start out the day in a better mood than that. Remember, it's attitude. It's the attitude of how you do it. You can replace that negative thought with a positive one, and that's what we're going to be talking about here, is replacing those thoughts here in the next few pages. But you got to be aware of the difference between the negative and positive before you can begin training yourself to do it. Remembering it's an all-over thing. It shows in your attitude, in your persona, in your aura, as some people say, all those things, okay? So let's look at, let's go ahead and put the slide up again. And what you've got there is negative thinkers have, and the first box says, self-criticism or negative self-talk. I'm so stupid. And everybody makes mistakes and sometimes bad choices. And I myself today, something occurred and I thought, "Oh, you big dummy." Said it to myself, just like that right there. First one, boom, right there. I did. But I immediately caught what I did and I turned it around and said, I could do better next time. I'll just remember that this driveway is here, not on down the road. So it's easy to do, but you don't have to dwell on it. And that's what we want. That's what we want to do. If you're practicing doing something differently than what you've been doing, then you're going to make mistakes. It's going to occur sometimes. Okay. Now, also, negative thinkers have pessimistic expectations. I'll never figure this thing out. Well, guess what? If you keep saying that, you won't. And then the next one is low self-worth. I can't do anything right. No wonder nobody wants to be my friend. You can drop the slide for a minute. Now, that statement right there, I can't do anything right. No wonder no one wants to be my friend. I want to ask you something. Is it really true that nobody, like a person that says that, is it really true that they can't do anything right? No, it's not true. I mean, they can probably put their socks on right. They can probably pick up the remote control and press a button on it and make their TV work properly for what they're doing. Might be better that they're not watching it. It might help their attitude, but keep that in mind. Everybody can do something right. So when you use those statements like anything, well, I can't do anything right. Or on the other hand, if you say, I do everything right, that doesn't go anywhere either. They're lies. You're lying to yourself. Everybody makes mistakes. I don't care who you are. So you can practice, though. Practice. Okay. And then you'll notice, show the slide again, if you will. You'll notice, of course, the age-old glass that's at the halfway point. Notice I said the halfway point. Some people will call that half empty. Some will call it half full. And so our drawing right there shows that the pessimistic person will see that the glass is half empty. They're just like, oh, it's almost all gone. It's almost empty. There's not even any use messing with it now. Or you might see the optimistic person seeing that it's half full and say, wow, that is half full. I'm going to go ahead and get the portion of it that I can get right now, and maybe I can use it again and fill it up later or what have you. Just total different attitude. Remember, that stuff carries too. It spreads like wildfire, like a ripple in the water. It spreads. So look at positive thinkers. Now look what they have. Positive self-talk. I can learn from my mistakes. I'll do better next time. Sounds a little corny, doesn't it? I mean, you're thinking, you could be thinking, well, that occurs sometimes, and And what am I going to do? I'm going to stop and say, well, I can learn from my mistakes. I'll do better next time. Well, you don't have to say it like that. What works for you? What positive statement works for you to replace the negatives with? Think about that. You don't have to do it exactly. You don't have to say the exact sentence that's in this book right here. It's just an example for you. Optimistic expectations. Well, things will work out okay. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. Because things will work out okay. You know, you're going to live another day. In the whole global aspect of you thinking that the glass is half empty or half full today, you know, if you get it wrong, if you find that you're thinking negative, guess what? You're probably going to live another day. I can't guarantee you that you will, of course, but you're probably going to live another day and things will work out okay. But by you thinking it's half full or half empty, you know, it's just not going to change anything unless it becomes your way of life and your behavior carries on and it shows, you know. And one way or the other, positive or negative, it's going to come out. So confidence, that's the third check mark. As long as I continue to build a positive character, I will make the right choices. All right? Nothing wrong with that. Now, that's the type of confidence to have. Confidence in that, yes, you know that everything you've learned so far and everything you want to teach your students is that you can have that faith. You can have that confidence. You can have the knowing that as long as you continue to build a positive character, you're going to make the right choices. Because it does. You can drop that slide. It does show, and it does work that way. If you continue working on it, if you continue practicing, and you see, and others see in your life that you're being more optimistic about things, and you're joyful about things, and they want to be around you because you're a joyful person, you know, and you're the guy that wants to get stuff done because you know it can be done. Might not work out quite how you thought it was going to work out. There might be some pitfalls or something along the way that you got to deal with, but it's okay. Guess what? Optimistic person says, things are going to work out all right. We're going to get there. And then if you've been learning the peaceful solution along the way and you have authority over you and a situation comes up and the authority, you could call and find out, hey, I was thinking about doing this, you know, is this what you want to do? Or what would you have me do? You know, it's really, it really does set you free. It really, really does. When you make negative choices and you're pessimistic, it's like a pool table on your shoulders. You know, you just carry it around all the time, and the negative thoughts and the negative actions and wondering, you know, how people are thinking about you and so forth. It's just you carry it around, man. It's so nasty. It leads to depression. It leads to people committing suicide. It's just horrible. You know, turn it around. It really is just the difference in how you think about it. It really is. But you got to work at it. Show the next slide, please. Now, what you think to yourself and about yourself plays a major role in whether or not you respect yourself. So take a look at that. Read it again. What you think to yourself, you know, you're thinking these things, and about yourself plays a major role in whether or not you respect yourself. Now, you can take that slide down. Now, why would you think that, though? Think about that statement. Why would you think that? What you think to yourself and about yourself plays a major role, yes, a major role, in whether or not you respect yourself. Well, if you have negative thoughts about yourself, and you think to yourself negative thoughts too, like I'll just quit or I'll, you know, whatever, that's not going to lead to you respecting yourself. It's going to lead to you not respecting yourself. So it does play a major, major role. Okay. Now that was the missing page, page 35. We're going to move on to page 36 at this time. Next slide. Oh, look at that. It just popped up there. Attitude is everything. Have a positive attitude. Have a positive, optimistic attitude, not a pessimistic attitude, right? Attitude is everything. Okay, let's go to the next slide, please. All right. So replace those thoughts. This is page 36. Now, if we go back to the lesson plan for just a moment, you don't have to do anything with the slide at this time, but we go back to the lesson plan for just a minute on page E. This is where it says to have students turn to page 36 and do the exercise. Okay? So we'll talk about this for a minute and then answer the questions. Of course, you'll be answering them on your own in your own book, or we won't be calling them out here in the auditorium. So page 36, well, that's page 37 on the activity, but page 36 is replace those thoughts. Now, no one is immune to having negative thoughts. Everyone, and so check this out, and for the young men in here too, we learn along the way as we get a little bit older that everyone has to deal with disappointments. I mean, I don't care who you are, how much money you have, what your job situation is, what your family life situation is. Everybody at some point in time has to deal with a disappointment or a setback and making mistakes. You get that? Everybody. Everyone has to deal with it. And I know I stress some of these things, but, you know, I talk to people sometimes and even myself having thoughts and again, we're all practicing, you know. When there's a disappointment or setback, you can start throwing negative thoughts in there and blaming yourself. I mean, you know, one of the you can drop the slide for a minute, but one of the main things that people do in case of a loss in their family is someone is inevitably going to start blaming themselves for that loss. Well, if only I would have done this. If only I would have done that. It's my fault. That's not positive. That's not optimistic. All that's going to lead to is depression and even worse. But you know, it occurs all the time. So let's keep that in mind. And if you've been affected by that, you know, recently, any kind of loss or any disappointments or anything, don't be thinking that it's your fault and kicking yourself. In many instances, you could have done nothing about it anyway. And there's all kinds of things that occur like that in people's lives. And it's sad that people haven't learned these basic concepts of the peaceful solution to be able to do that. I mean, you would think that, yeah, that surely people have got to know not to think that way about themselves. Or, you know, you hear people saying to somebody, "Oh dear, it wasn't your fault," or "There's nothing you could have done," but they're not giving them any real step-by-step procedures to change the way they think. And that's the difference between being told something that might sound positive and being taught something that's positive and being taught how to have an optimistic attitude, you know, rather than someone just saying, "Well, you need to think better about those things," or "Why don't you quit thinking so negative?" That could be, you know, as bad as telling someone who's a diabetic to quit being a diabetic. You know, I know of a judge that I think William played, it was a couple classes ago, William played a clip of a judge that we know pretty well that after years of putting people away in prison for, you know, drug addiction and some other things, he realized that telling an addict to stop taking drugs, that they're not going to go out tonight and stop taking drugs. If you lock them away, they might stop taking drugs until they get the opportunity to do it again, or until they can figure out something to work out some kind of plan with somebody incarcerated with them to get the drugs, but you're not going to stop them from doing drugs until they want to stop doing drugs. And a lot of people can't do it like on their own, just cold turkey, boom, I'm done. Some say they did, some say they can, but it's usually with a lot of progression to that point, okay? I know people that have completely turned from doing drugs. And it would seem like they did it like immediately. But when we go back and look at the situation, we find that, it didn't take place immediately. They've been through couple rehabs or situations in their life where they stopped for a while and then started again, stopped for a while, started again, so they knew the detriment that was occurring in their life. And finally they got to a point where they were able to make it all work and make that final choice to stop once and for all. So it's a progression. It's that practicing, and it's the same thing here. And that's what the judge said, though, is that it's like telling a diabetic not to be a diabetic. You can't, it doesn't work that way. Okay? Not quite the same. It's really close, though. So, anyway, everyone has to deal with these disappointments, setbacks, and making mistakes. And you show the slide again. This is part of the process of growing up. Just remember, as long as you continue to build a positive moral character, you can minimize major mistakes that involve taking risks with your health, safety, and well-being. And of course, this is talking not only to a young audience about growing up, but it's also talking to those of us that are a little advanced in age, talking about growing up too. There's plenty of people that are, 40, 50, 60 years old that have not grown up yet. They're still doing crazy things and have not seen the benefit of thinking optimistically about everything in their life, looking towards the future, and not thinking optimistically as far as, I'm going to go get me some crack tonight, hopefully, if I get the money. I'm not talking about that, because that's not really optimistic. That's a negative thing that's going to affect you. If we just reread this right here, it says, as long as you continue to build a positive moral character, you can minimize major mistakes that involve taking risks with your health, safety, and well-being. And that's what we want to do. That's positive. If you make a mistake, however, it doesn't mean that you're a failure. You might think you are for a minute. You might kick yourself a little bit, but remember, and I try to mention this just about in every class, you have to leave yourself room to grow. That's what this practice thing is about. You practice, boom. Oh, man, why'd I do that? You have to leave yourself room to grow and not go around kicking yourself all the time and doing all this negative talk. It doesn't help you. It doesn't help you achieve getting it right. Yeah, you notice what you've done. You evaluate the situation. You see how you could have done it better, and you go forward. And that's one of the things. Well, let me read this next sentence. It says, don't beat yourself up by saying mean and hurtful things to yourself. Drop the slide for just a minute. Let's go here for a second. I always like to show this in hopes of getting this in your mind. Once or twice, okay, you see it, and you might think, well, why does he hold that up there every time? It's because I'd like you to get that in your mind. If this were strictly a classroom that we were teaching Peaceful Solution in every night, I would have it hanging right here somewhere where you could see it at all times. It's very important to get it in your mind. One of the most talked about things, but one of the least practiced, right here. Stop. Think. Consider your options. You're evaluating at this time what's going on, and then you proceed with the right choice. Sounds easy? Not so. It's tough to do, and you have to practice, okay? Going back to the slide for a moment on page 36 of the Respect Unit, the best way to handle pessimistic thoughts, negative self-talk, and self-criticism is to learn how to replace those negative thoughts with positive ones. Think about it a minute. Start letting your mind kind of flow. Negative thoughts with positive ones. Hey, you might be having a negative thought about me and what I'm saying right now. Well, stop and replace it with a positive one. See how that works, And that's just an example, because we're always thinking, and we're always thinking about people. If I look around right now and I can see this person, this person, this person, I can form like an immediate attitude about that person with what I know about them and their behavior and so forth and so on. And so if it's a pessimistic thought, I want to get that out of my mind right away and have a more optimistic thought about that person. I don't know what many people have been through in their lives. I mean, I get an opportunity to share some things with all of you, from time to time on things that took place in my life. So you know probably more about me than I know about you. So you know some of the things I've been through. But we got to be able to have empathy. This is another thing that we learn in the Peaceful Solution, is to have empathy and actually think about that other person, not just with your lips, not just mentioning it with your mouth, but actually doing it, practicing it, having empathy, thinking, okay, well, that guy's behavior is a little strange, but I wonder what he's been through in his life, What does he have to, is it harder for him to practice self-control than it is for me? Is it harder for him to replace the negative thoughts with positive thoughts than it is for me? Maybe I've got it easy. So think about that when you're dealing with others. You know what? That is the Peaceful Solution. That is the whole thing behind the Peaceful Solution, is how we deal with others and ourselves, because we have to deal with ourselves to be able to deal with others positively. But do you get that? That's what it's all about. So the best way is to replace those negative thoughts with positive ones. And to do this, imagine a big eraser in your head. Not that it's taken all the room and your brain is kicked out, but a big eraser in your head. Imagine it. Not that it's in your mind, but you're imagining the picture of it, that simply erases any negative thoughts about yourself as easily as chalk from a blackboard. If you don't erase the negative thoughts completely on the first few tries, don't give up, just get that word, practicing. I know I'm wearing you out with that probably, the practice, but that's what it takes. And show the next slide, please. So there's our eraser, giving you a picture of it there that you can put in your mind and dream or pretend that it's going around there, erasing negative thoughts, going down one area and back to another or something. So that's the negative thought that's fixing to be erased right there. And developing the right thoughts every day can keep trouble away. Kind of like an apple a day keeping the doctor away. But developing the right thoughts every day can keep trouble away. Let's go to the next slide. Now, just to throw something in that we've been through already, is evaluating. That's what I want you to look at right there. It's kind of hard to see because this is an old slide. It wasn't zoomed in, but right there at that first highlighted area, I'll read it to you. It says evaluating yourself. That's what I've got highlighted there. Evaluating yourself and what is important to you as an individual is essential in achieving the self-respect so that you can take that self-respect and be able to respect others. And down at the bottom of this particular slide, I wanted to remind everybody that you demonstrate self-respect, because this goes hand in hand with empathy too, is you demonstrate self-respect by being humble and seeking ways to improve yourself. And self-respect means accepting that you do not know everything. Sorry if I'm the one to break that to you, but you don't know everything. Nor do I, nor does anybody. You don't know everything. And that's a healthy attitude that will enable you to continue learning new things about yourself. If you have that attitude, like, well, I don't know it all. A humble person, this is the last highlighted area on there, a humble person is also willing to accept being wrong and learn from his or her mistakes. A humble person is willing to accept being wrong and learn from his or her mistakes. That doesn't mean you have to go around kicking yourself. Remember, you just want to remain humble and teachable. And let's go to the next slide. Okay, so this is an activity. This is page 37 in our respect unit. And so that's the main page. I've got it broken down here if you go to the next slide. Hopefully you can read some of that. The following scenarios will give you practice avoiding negative self-talk. Use the lines to write down your positive replacement thoughts. Okay, so in the example number 1, we're going to talk about these just a minute. In example number 1, it says, although you studied hard, you failed the test. Okay, so think about it a minute. Think about the last time you failed at something, possibly a test. You might be a while back for some of us, but others it might have been very recently. But think about it. You began to, and I'm talking about like a written test or something there like that, but at the same time, there are things that come up in our daily life that really will test our resolve to hold on to what we're learning right now. It'll come, and whether you've been practicing these things or not will show through in how you handle that test, whether it's written down or not. But you begin to think to yourself, I'm a failure, I'll never pass this. Then you realize that your thoughts were negative. Okay? So if you're practicing positive self-talk, if you're practicing treating others properly, if you're practicing self-control, if you're practicing these things, then it is going to come to your mind quicker than later. You'll realize that your thoughts are negative. You decided to replace the thoughts with something more positive and respectful. What would you say? Well, what would you say? Think about it for just a minute. You don't have to read exactly what it says right there in the book if you have a teacher's manual. That's just an example of some of the answers that you might get. What would you do? You studied hard. You failed the test. You started thinking you're a failure. I'll never pass this class. And you realized your thoughts were negative. What would you do to replace those thoughts with something more positive and respectful? What would you say? I'm going to give you just a second for all of you to think about that for a minute. What would you say? Think about it. You don't have to tell nobody. Just think what you would say to just switch it around. Something that works for you. Okay, so here's an example of an answer that might come about in case some of you are struggling a little. But I did the best I could. I can ask the teacher to make up the grade. One bad grade is not going to affect my overall grade, if things are going to be okay, right? I can make it up on the next test. I'll get tutoring for this class, so they're planning on working on their weaknesses in hopes of achieving the desired result, and I'll be prepared next time. So that means they're going to practice, so they'll be prepared next time for the thing coming up, okay? All right, let's look at number 2 right there. Did everybody get some kind of answer in their head on that? Hopefully, yeah. All right, and those of you out in the internet world there, too. Number 2, the debate team. So this is kind of like a classroom situation, was counting on your presentation to raise the team's combined score and put your school in the running for regional competition. So they're counting on you. They've got their hopes behind you. Excuse me. When it was your turn to compete, you realized you had left your note cards on the bus. Oh boy. Left the note cards. I know someone who's been in this situation before. Left their notes or letters they were going to read on the bus or somewhere, and they had to improvise. But anyway, all of the facts and proof for your presentation, in this case, were on those cards. The judges wouldn't wait for you to get your cards, so you clumsily gave your presentation. Improvised a little bit. It turned out not so great. You're a little bit clumsy in it. Your score was low. It prevented the overall team from being high enough and make it to the competition. So right now, you start having thoughts of what's going to occur. What would you start thinking? What would you think about how your teammates would think of you and so forth? Well, here's an example of, I can't believe I left those cards on the bus. I'm so stupid. They're going to kick me off the team for this. Then, of course, if you've been practicing, trying to get past these negatives, you'll remember, wait a minute, I'm having negative thoughts. Time to replace it. So what would you do? Again, what would you do? Here you are, you got people counting on you, and you mess up, whatever the situation might be. You know, you left the wrench at home. You left your notes at home. You left the gallon of milk at home that you were bringing for Cheerios or something. Who knows? I mean, just giving you examples. This covers so much ground. It's not just about a debate team. It's about what was occurring today, that people had their hopes in you, that you were going to do something that made everything come together and work out great for everybody, and it got flubbed somehow. And what did you start thinking about yourself? What did you start thinking they were going to think about you? Did any of them have anything negative to say? You know, I'm going to throw that in there. I mean, not only you talking to yourself in a negative manner, but did others do it? Did they say, "Oh man, you're so stupid," because you forgot that? You know, so it's liable to have occurred. Might have occurred today. Anyway, you, though, in your thoughts, remember to replace all this with positive thoughts, whether it's someone else saying you're stupid or you're saying you're stupid or what have you. Hey, I didn't forget the cards on purpose. I did the best I could from my memory. And, you know, I'll apologize to everybody and be more prepared for the presentation next time. Might be if you worked a little harder on it or took a little more time getting whatever it was you left behind, the cards, the wrench, the what have you, you know, taking a few more moments to make sure you had everything. You know, we can look back and see where we could have done things differently, but you don't have to kick yourself. Leave yourself room to grow. Let's go to the next slide, please. Next slide, please. Did we go there? Okay, yeah. Okay, number 3. You just found out that 2 of your friends will be going to the mall to see a movie tomorrow night, and you feel hurt that they didn't ask you to go. Well, you can replace that with anything. It doesn't have to be a movie. You know, they might have saved you from something by not asking you to go. But you start sulking and thinking, oh, they don't even like me. They don't want to be with me. So you got your feelings hurt because your friends didn't ask you to go. So think about it. What situation have you been in recently where you weren't included in the group that was going? And might have been someone you would have normally thought that you would be going somewhere with, or getting a ride from, or you know, helping out in something, or them helping you, or what have you. You got your feelings hurt that you weren't asked to be part of it. So then what that leads to is, instead of understanding that a person can, including yourself, can ask whoever they want to ask to go with them somewhere. It doesn't mean that they don't like them or have thrown them away as a friend or what have you. No, it just means that they didn't ask them in this particular situation. Just like you yourself, if you look at it, have you always asked everybody to go with you everywhere? No. So you feel hurt that they didn't ask, and you start thinking, well, they don't like me. They don't even want to be with me. But then you stop and you begin to replace those thoughts. What would you replace it with? Were you able to replace the thoughts? Or did you keep thinking negative? Are you still thinking negative about it? You didn't go somewhere with somebody and they didn't ask you and now you're mad. You know, that's not the way to go. You know, you got to practice the self-control. Remember the stop sign. So anyways, answers can vary. In this case, here's an example. Well, there's got to be a reason they didn't ask me. And I'll just ask them if I can come along after I check with my parents. I know they care about me. There must be some misunderstanding. I know they wouldn't do anything to intentionally hurt me. I'll just go and talk to them, you know. That might be the right move, might not be the right move. It depends on the situation, who you're dealing with, how close you are to them. There's all kinds of variables that come into play. This is when you start evaluating the situation and you start considering the options. But before you get all mad and start throwing a fit, you stop and you think about these things, and then you look at the best route to go, which there's some suggestions right there which could go that way. So those are some replacement thoughts that you can use. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, so we saw this slide last week, and again, I apologize for not being blown up there. Maybe we can put it on the overhead and get a little closer. You want to try the overhead? Can you? Let's see. Let me zoom in there a little bit. Can you read that where it's highlighted? Okay. So now that I have it, how do I keep it? So this all goes together. Go to the next slide real quick. We'll come back to this. There you go. This all goes together. So I'll say it again. This is kind of like one of the things that I really like to point out is how this works. It's synergistic. It works together. And this is kind of like the way the circle works. So you have an incident or trigger. See that to the upper right up there? An incident or trigger. You've got to have something that takes place to start this process. And it's taking place right now, whether you know it or not. Your thoughts are triggering something in you right now to think about what's going on around you, either positively or negatively. And so your thoughts are moving right now. Trust me, they are, right? I mean, you're not just blank and hearing my voice. Your mind is working right now. So the trigger or the incident, something takes place, and then there's the thoughts, the next little arrow. The thoughts start taking place in your mind at 1,000,000 miles an hour, boom, 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 bouncing off the walls of your skull, And this is where you have to really take hold of it and start thinking properly. Like we just went through these scenarios, these examples. You've got to stop here and start thinking about these things before your feelings start moving, before you start getting a flushed face for being angry, before you start being embarrassed or something, or feeling, not self-confident, but self-conscious, feeling these things, control your thoughts so that it will control your feelings. And then don't make your decisions based upon feelings. That is the worst thing you could do. If you're making your decisions based upon feelings, emotions, then you're going to have a rough ride. It's going to be like a roller coaster gone stray, flying off the course. You got to go back to the thoughts and decide to operate in the right manner, logically, and according to the peaceful solution, using self-control, practicing respect, acceptance, going back to the basic character principles that we've learned. And then your actions are going to come out in a positive manner, in the right way. And for every action, there is a consequence. Consequence doesn't have to mean something bad. It just means that a consequence of your actions is something that took place because you acted. So that consequence can be positive or it can be negative. And you might not even see it right away. It might take years before the negative consequence comes or the positive consequence shows up in the form of a reward. It might be years. It might be years before you see it take place in others' lives. But the bottom line is that should not have any effect on you practicing this properly and getting it in your mind. I mentioned last week, you could put that under a bright light, close your eyes and look at it for about 10 or 20 seconds, and you'll still see it, in your kind of in your mind. It's one way to kind of remember that. Okay, let's go back to the that slide with the. Let's go back one. There you go. Oh, I'm sorry. It's on the overhead, right? There you go. All right. So where it's highlighted, it says maintaining your positive character means protecting and guarding yourself from influences and choices that could lead to developing negative character traits. So it helps in everything that you do in trying to do this practicing of all the things we've been talking about. It helps you in maintaining what you've got, the positive character that you've built upon and that you've been practicing and guarding and protecting. This is what you do. You guard yourself from influences and choices that could take you back the other way. We want to make sure that we guard ourselves. And there's the example right there of showing the way you guard it is by having all these different positive character traits there, and you're practicing all of them, and that'll protect you from these negative influences coming your way. I like to show that one too. Anyone who's seen me teach any of the Peaceful Solution classes knows that you've seen that a few times before. Well, hopefully it'll get in our minds and stay there. You know, it sure has helped me. I don't always get it absolutely right, but I sure try, and I know many of you are doing the same thing. Let's go to the next slide, please. And so there it is again. Attitude is everything. I'd like you to kind of remember that it is, all this thing is an attitude. It's the attitude that you have, the aura that you have of being optimistic or pessimistic, you know. And yeah, you've heard me say that a couple times tonight, but that's okay. You'll hear me say it again too. And then let's go to the overhead for a moment. And so remember, we talked about this earlier about how it ripples outwards. Just as the negative behaviors ripple out, the devastating effects, the positive character ripples out positive effects, as we know. And, you know, down here at the bottom it says a person might not get an opportunity to be a hero every day, but by demonstrating positive character traits in your daily interactions with others, you can motivate and encourage others to be positive too. And again, that's the key. That's what this Peaceful Solution is all about, is being empathetic, being respectful, practicing self-control. And so where other people can see what is going on with you, see your behavior, and see how you conduct yourself and how optimistic you are instead of pessimistic, to where they will want to be like you. And so as a teacher of the Peaceful Solution, I mean, that's the whole bottom line right there, is you want to be an example for your students so that when they see you, they will see you doing the right thing, the right positive, optimistic thing, and they will want to be like you. But if they see you doing negative things, which again, we all do from time to time, we're practicing, we're trying to get it right, along the way we mess up. Don't kick yourself too much. Just explain, you know, if you have a student sees you do something negative, you know, tell them, explain to them that, hey, you know, I'm trying, and thanks for pointing that out to me. You know, that's really what you can do. Thanks for pointing that out to me. You can tell that to your students when they show you something that you might not have seen about yourself, or you get caught, you know, doing something that you shouldn't be doing. Okay? So keeping all that in mind, the next class will be on Sunday, the 19th, I believe it is, at 5:30 p.m. Sunday at 5:30 p.m. That's on the 19th of this month. We look forward to seeing everybody here again. And in the meantime, hey, try to put a smile on your face. Try to be optimistic in everything that you do. Again, you're practicing. Don't kick yourself too hard if you don't get it right every time. But let's get positive. Let's get positive about everything in our life. Let's get positive about our jobs. Let's get positive about those around us and how we can talk to them in a respectful manner and make their day joyful. Okay? Thank you for coming. I surely do appreciate it. I look forward to seeing you again.